Hi guys, welcome back. Today's case is not a really long one, but it is one that absolutely blew my mind and I just needed to cover it with you guys. I don't think a lot of you will have heard of it, and I like covering cases that you aren't necessarily that aware of. It is an American case, but it is one that just takes your breath away where cruelty is concerned. And unfortunately, there isn't a ton of background about the perpetrators, but I've done my best to find as much out as I possibly could regarding the Mary and Charles Vinson case. Also, if you're new to my channel, well, thanks for being here. I release my crime content twice weekly, and I always will. So if you like crime content and you haven't subscribed yet, why don't you? Get your notifications on as well so you never miss an episode. And to every single one of you who are signed up to my Patreon and YouTube membership, thank you so much. I can only do this because of you, and I hope you're enjoying all your full-length content that I'm putting on there. If you do like my content, there is more available. Let's talk about Mary Vinson. I've put a picture up of her because I think some people just look nasty. And I'm afraid that Mary Vinson is one of those individuals. She lived with her husband, Charles Vinson. They hadn't been married for a very long time, and he'd actually brought two sons of his into the relationship. They were living in rural Kent County, Delaware, which was where their USA home was. And the boys obviously were Charles Vinson's biological children, but they were not her biological children. Now, they lived in a really tiny town of Houston, which is about 20 miles south of Dover, and it's about 65 miles south of Wilmington, Delaware. It's a very rural area, and we all know that rural environments lend themselves to a level of isolation, and if you want isolation from the authorities, they're perfect places, because the truth is, your neighbors aren't necessarily going to be seeing things as they would in very built-up areas. And it always interests me when I do cases on horrendous child abuse and we look at these children being moved to places that are relatively rural, because it means that no one is looking from the outside in, and that gives a level of safety to abusers because they think that nobody's going to get involved. And like I said, that kind of confidence is really negative where abusers are concerned, because they enjoy what they do. They enjoy harm. They don't want people to interfere with harm, and they get very tetchy if people are starting to be a bit nosy about their parenting, for example. Now we get to June 2021, and at this point the state police actually questioned the couple. They'd received a report, and that report was that there was some concern for the young boys. And they are very young, they're 10 and 11 at this point in time. But in spite of the fact that the police had visited, they got this information that was concerning about the couple, they don't end up filing any criminal charges. The Vinsons basically said that they haven't actually hurt the boys. And of course, Mary Vinson plays the whole, I love my boys. They're my own as far as I'm concerned. I treat them exactly as I would treat my own biological children, which says very little about Mary Vinson, as you will find out shortly. But that's what she's peddling. She's peddling this idea that they have a harmonious relationship, that she would never lay a hand on her children, because even though they are her stepchildren, she loves them dearly. And her husband, when he's being interviewed by the police, says, you know what? They do sometimes get locked in their rooms, but there is a reason why we lock them in the rooms. Now, by the way, I don't agree with locking any child in the room. I think that's abuse, full stop. You should never be locking children anywhere. You should know how to manage their behavior. And when there are problems with their behavior, you should create solutions, not just locking them up so you don't have to deal with their behavior. It makes no sense. And like I said, it's always a big red flag as far as I'm concerned. In fact, if I was doing an interview with you on a child protection level and you told me that you locked your child in their bedroom, I would see that as an abusive scenario, and I would want to investigate further. Even if it turned out that you were entirely lovely and this was the only thing that you did that I disagreed with, I would still want to take some time to explore what was going on in your parenting. But the police buy it. Oh, just locking them in the room because they've got problems with the behavior. And they said that these included inappropriate touching and also harming the dogs. That should be another big red flag. Like I said, if I was doing an interview and it was about child protection and you're locking your kids in your room and then you're confiding in me that the reason that you're doing that is because your kids are inappropriately touching you or others and also are harming dogs, I'm going to be thinking we need some serious therapeutic intervention for these children. But of course, in this case, no action gets taken by the authorities. Now, it's worth saying before I go any further in this, I have a step family myself. My husband is stepfather to my 2 eldest children. And the reality is that when we look at research where stepchildren are concerned, they are 10 times more likely to be abused by a step parent than a biological parent. So that indicates that more children who are in step families suffer abuse. And there are lots of different reasons for that, which we'll explore. But that's important to note because this marriage has been a recent relationship and it's been a pretty instantaneous connection where abuse is concerned towards the children through the hands of Mary. So she's kind of got together with this guy, married him, and now is just, as far as she is concerned, in complete control over these children, and she can do what she wishes with these children. She sees it as her right. And like I said, you are 10 times more likely to be abused by a step parent because of that kind of mindset. Now, in October 2021, the police are alerted once again to the Vinson family. And the reason for that is because a doctor at the Nemours Hospital for Children literally told the police that one of the boys had been at imminent risk of death. So when he was admitted, this child was so severely dehydrated that there was a chance he was going to die. Now, just imagine how long that child must have been denied water. And also imagine how that means the child has been in that home. It means that they have been denied access to water. We're not talking about a 1-year-old with dehydration. We're talking about a 10 and 11-year-old, one of which at this point is severely dehydrated. They have not been given access to water. So they are being withheld from having access. And that shows a level of torture that is just utterly abhorrent. Now, at this point, the doctor told the police, as far as I'm concerned, this child's a victim of child torture. That little boy had to spend 3 days in intensive care before they could even stabilize him. That's how close to death he was. Now, just imagine the kind of monster who can put a child in that position. Imagine the mentality of a human being who can witness a child fading until a point where they are so dangerously unwell, they don't just require rehydration, they're in intensive care because they may die. Their vital organs are failing because they're so dehydrated. Now, of course, at this point, it gets really serious. So the State Division of Family Services immediately take custody of both of the boys. Thank God, because no matter what facility they're put in, they're going to be fed. They're going to be given water. And that is a whole heap better than the experience has been enduring at home, where they should have been protected, where they should have been cared for. The police then start to investigate the couple, and one of the things that they learn about, very fortunately, is a video camera in the home. Now, of course, they want to get hold of that video camera because they know if anything untoward's been playing out, the likelihood is they'll capture it on tape, and that means they bang to rights as a couple, they'll be able to get them found guilty, and they want to be able to do that. They go to the Vinsons' home because obviously they want to seize the recording, but the camera is missing. Why is that not a surprise? When it comes down to the fact that you know you're guilty, the first thing you're going to do is try to get rid of the incriminating evidence. And what does that tell us about the Vinsons? They don't want to take accountability and responsibility. They want to get away with what they've been doing. Now, the pressure is applied, shall we say, by the police, and Charles Vinson later admits that he'd taken a DVR with the footage to a storage facility. The police then managed to locate the footage, which is indeed from a camera in the boy's bedroom, and it's horrific. So this couple have literally recorded the horror of the abuse these children have endured. Over the course of the investigation, the police are obviously asking Charles Vinson, how did you let this happen? Because it's clear that for the most part, Mary is the major perpetrator. But nonetheless, he does admit that, yes, I did join in some of the beatings. And he then starts to tell the investigators that the boys would sometimes be confined for up to 7 days as punishment. And they would often have food withheld from them for 24 hours. And we can agree that if he's telling them it was 24 hours, it was probably 72 hours because he's only going to tell them bits and pieces of truth, as opposed to describing the true brutality of what those children suffered. And obviously the police are saying to him, why did you let this happen? At the end of the day, this was a new partner. She started immediately to harm your children. Why didn't you protect them? And he basically said, I turned a blind eye to my wife's serial abuse. And that means that Charles is 100% complicit. You don't have to be the person harming the children to be absolutely a colluder in this kind of abuse. He let it play out. He joined in on some of the beatings. They were being videoed. He was watching his children die in front of his eyes, and he did absolutely nothing. He could have changed everything in an instant. He could have thrown her out. He could have called the police, but no. He obviously didn't treasure, didn't value, didn't have any compassion when it came down to his own two boys. Now, in February 2022, Mary and Charles Vinson are arrested, and they were both held in lieu of a $600,000 cash bail. So basically, the judge is like, you're going nowhere. Just going to make sure that you do not get out of this prison until your case, because no one's going to be putting up that kind of money for these. Now, the arrest warrant alleged that there were dozens of instances of physical abuse. And on that warrant, these demonstrated things like punching, shaking, kicking, jabbing, and kneeing, which apparently were often to the face, which is just harrowing beyond belief. And that warrant alleged that Mary Vinson committed these violent acts against one of the boys, sometimes with his brother watching. So she enjoyed it. She enjoyed watching them suffer, and she enjoyed making each watch the other suffer. That power play is of the highest level. That's about wanting to decimate the self-esteem and self-worth of those individuals whilst making nothing safe. And it's about letting each of them know that they had no power, that she could literally beat one of them up in front of the other and they could do nothing to protect that child. So as siblings, they could not protect each other. That is decimating their sense of independence and confidence. And she's doing that because she knows that she's not just violating them physically, she's violating them emotionally and psychologically. Now, as I said, Charles, he witnessed some of those attacks and he didn't do anything. In fact, often he would spank the boys, he'd raise his fist to them. So he is absolutely guilty as hell. We get to September 2022. Now, at this point, the couple were indicted by a Kent County grand jury on a staggering 646 felony and misdemeanor charges. So Mary Vinson faced 600 charges and Charles Vinson faced 46. And prosecutors described the charges as serial abuse and torture of their children. According to prosecutors, the Vinson boys were abused over a 20-month period. This abuse actually started in early 2020. One of the boys was abused at age 10. And the other boy was abused from ages 11 to 13. And over the entire period of abuse, the boys were hospitalized for severe malnutrition and other conditions several times. So what on earth was going on? What was happening that these children are being treated for severe malnutrition and other conditions and nobody was essentially raising the alarm? There seems to be some abject failures there in the healthcare providers. So the court documents relating to those hospitalizations said that the children had been hospitalized between March 2021 and March 2022. So in April 2021, both of the children were actually hospitalized on the same day. At one point, one of the boys stayed in hospital for almost a month. And the couple basically took the boys to at least 3 different hospitals because they wanted to avoid having their abuse discovered. But there should be some kind of interagency work where medical situations are concerned. And that just didn't seem to have happened. And they also provided false information about the children to the medical professionals and doctors when the children required medical treatment. So they were just fabricating the reasons why the boys were there. Now, when the police investigated the circumstances of the injuries, the couple, as we know, lied to them. So there had been some issues raised because that's why the police visited initially, but nobody had followed anything through. That just accepted what the parents had said, which is ludicrous. If they think that the parents are abusing children, they shouldn't ask the parents to acknowledge or deny it because the parents are going to deny it. Now, the abuse that was actually inflicted on the boys specifically included being forced to stand motionless for long periods of time, which is just devastating because children need to be moving around. It's natural for kids to fidget. So to actually have to stand motionless for long periods of time is a very painful experience. They had food and water withheld. They were force fed. They were forced to wear diapers because they were denied access to sanitation. There were these violent and repetitive physical assaults that included beating and strangling them. And prosecutor Kristen DeWalt said that the boys were literally forced to wash themselves with the same water used to clean their urine and feces, which is completely unsanitary, but also is humiliating. And that's the thing. She wanted to humiliate them. She enjoyed humiliating them. Most of that abuse was captured on video cameras that the couple had installed in the boys' bedrooms. I do love it when these absolute abusers do not think about how all of that information is going to be highly incriminating against them, and they just go ahead and have all these cameras there because they like to watch these kids suffer. You know, they like to know that they can replay this, but all the while they're incriminating themselves ridiculously. And it's brilliant because it means that they cannot escape the truth of what they did. So this is literally putting nails in their very own coffins. Prosecutors said that there were months and months of videos showing the abuse, and the prosecutors emphasised that, of course, it was Mary Vinson who was indeed predominantly responsible for the physical abuse against the kids, but Charles was absolutely aware of the abuse and did not help his children. And like I said, a contributing factor of this is because some children are going to be at risk in step-parent situations. And when we look at research in psychology and sociology, which is, to be fair, long examined, what is commonly described as the Cinderella effect. And that means that children in stepfamilies can be at heightened risk of abuse compared to those in two biological parent families, or indeed single biological parent families. Now, of course, before I go on, it is crucial to note that, of course, most step-parents provide loving, nurturing environments. My husband does for my own children. But nonetheless, these are risk factors that I'm going to talk about that can contribute to children being abused in these situations. So first of all, step-parents haven't got the same evolutionary, emotional or social bond with a child in the same way as a biological parent does. Now, this can sometimes, it doesn't always, but it can sometimes reduce what would be considered those protective instincts or feelings of responsibility toward the child. Also, stepfamilies can experience a lot of added stress due to those blended family dynamics, so differences in parenting styles, high tension between households. And when you think about high stress per se, it can exacerbate more abusive behaviours, whether that's in individuals or in families. And if their family is already prone to maltreatment, then bringing a person in as a step-parent, that can increase that stress and therefore increase the abuse. And also a newly formed step-parent, step-child relationship, in this case, absolutely exemplifies that. So it was a relatively new relationship. It may be lacking in trust or attachment. So if conflicts arise early on, they don't have that benefit of a long-established emotional connection. And those long-established emotional connections offer a buffer against harsh or punitive behaviours, and that just doesn't exist. And in some instances, extended families or social networks, they likely don't intervene as quickly. So if a child's primary caregiver is not a biological relative, and there might be instability in housing or family arrangements, it colludes to mean that they haven't got a consistent insight into a child's daily life, whether they're professionals or family members who are outside of that immediate relationship. And because there isn't a relationship with the non-biological parent, people don't feel as confident in challenging them. So that can also be why it exacerbates this kind of negativity and abuse. And particularly in this case, that seems to be exactly what happened. Now, on September the 26th, 2023, 46-year-old Mary Vinson did indeed plead guilty to 30 felony counts of abusing her stepsons. These included 6 counts of child abuse in the first degree, so the most serious, 7 counts of attempted child abuse in the first degree, 2 counts of kidnapping in the first degree, 3 counts of attempted assault in the second degree, 4 counts of strangulation, 3 counts of reckless endangering in the first degree, 2 counts of endangering the welfare of a child, 2 counts of conspiracy in the second degree, 1 count of false statements to the police. So at this point, she faced a minimum sentence of 30 years and a maximum sentence of a pretty grand 444 years. I don't know why we don't have sentences like that in the UK. It makes my heart happy to imagine somebody can be actually condemned to 444 years. Now, the boy's father, who was 37 at the time, Charles Vinson, he pled guilty to 12 felony counts. They included 3 counts of child abuse in the first degree, 2 counts of kidnapping in the first degree, 1 count of assault in the second degree, 2 counts of acts of intimidation, 2 counts of endangering the welfare of a child, 2 counts of conspiracy in the second degree, and 1 misdemeanor account of child abuse in the third degree. So he faced a minimum sentence of 10 years and a whopping maximum sentence of 158 years. And I'm imagining the kidnapping is there, whilst I can't turn up the information actually in the research, just from my own experience, is because potentially they weren't actually telling the biological mother of these children where they were, and therefore they have kidnapped the children because she didn't know where they were and she hadn't had access to the children, and maybe there was a custody issue there as well. So he faced a minimum sentence of 10 years and a whopping maximum of 158 years. Now, following the plea hearing, Delaware attorney Kathy Jennings released a statement. She said, "These are the cases that keep us up at night. The pain that these children endured and that was inflicted by people who should have been their protectors is unthinkable. Thanks to the efforts of our prosecutors and of our partners in law enforcement, these abusers will be in prison for years to come. Their victims are safe now, but I also know that they have a long road of healing ahead. They are all in our hearts today." Now, during their sentencing, prosecutors asked the court for 118-year sentence for Mary and for a 37-year term for Charles. So they're not going easy on these individuals. Now, the defense for the pair, they actually requested, of course, for them to impose the minimum sentences. Charles Vinson's defense attorney, John Malik, said that Charles did not like conflict and felt manipulated by his wife. I kid you not, that was literally what they said. He said, "He was in the middle between his wife and his kids, and he admits that he failed his sons." I mean, that's ludicrous. It is utterly ludicrous. So it's all her fault, and he just didn't want an argument. You know, "Oh, darling, I don't want to argue with you." "Well, I'm going to beat your kids up." "Well, I don't want to argue with you about that, so I'm going to say nothing. I want you to video them, and I also want you to get involved with the beatings. I don't want any conflict, so I'll just go ahead and I'll beat the children with you." Sorry, that's a bit conflictual, beating your kids, isn't it? No. What's conflictual is in adult relationships disagreeing with your wife. I kid you not. Can you imagine having that kind of mentality? How warped is that? "I don't like to row, so I just allow her to all but kill my kids." It just seems like a completely rational thing. I mean, if you're not in couples therapy and the therapist is not suggesting, just agree with your abusive partner. It's fine. Let the kids die. As long as you two aren't rowing, then we're all good. It just makes no sense whatsoever. But like I said, this is the kind of liver-lilled coward that comes into court blaming his partner as opposed to himself for the horrors that his children have been through. Now, before they were actually formally sentenced, both Mary and Charles Vinson addressed the court. And Mary Vinson literally said this: "I didn't want to hurt them." Sorry, Mary, can we just go back and I just need to listen to that again. Just say what you just said. "I didn't want to hurt them." Okay, Mary, why are you in court? "Because I hurt the children seriously and significantly." "So why are you saying you didn't want to hurt them?" "Because as I was hurting them repeatedly, consistently, for a protracted, drawn-out period of time, I was thinking to myself, I don't really want to do this. And so I'm saying right now, here, in court, on oath, I didn't want to hurt them. I did hurt them. I nearly killed them. But when I really reflect on it, I didn't want to hurt them." Literally, can somebody throw the book at her in that moment? And I am talking about a heavy, leather-backed book, maybe filled with something even heavier, like lead. In fact, maybe just a block of lead with a book backing, a cleverly disguised book, you know? Anyway, I digress. But that's what she was peddling in court. "I didn't want to hurt them." Wouldn't every defendant use that? "I didn't want to murder him." Oh, okay, fine. Well, it's nice to know that your intentions were different to your actions, so we will, of course, let you leave. Said no judge ever. Also, sorry, I am laughing because of what she actually did in court, because it shows the kind of level of arrogance this woman has and why she would never be rehabilitated. Genuinely, she needs to be taken off the streets for eternity, because genuinely, she actually took issue with the prosecution suggesting she was a monster. So the prosecution, understandably, they're going hard with the case. They're like, Mary Vinson is a monster because Mary Vinson is a monster. I mean, her actions were monstrous, the results were monstrous, the children nearly died. You don't get more of a monster than that. And it wasn't one occasion, it was constantly, from pretty much the moment she came into those boys' lives. If ever there is a description of a monster, it is her. But she said that she had issues with the prosecution saying that, and also added, it didn't start out that way. I loved those boys like they were my own. Just going to throw it out there. You can also be highly abusive to your biological children. So, Mary Vinson, no one's buying it. And also, the very fact that you say, I treat them like my own, well, they're not your property. But obviously you felt that they were your property, which is why you were quite happy to go out of your way to decimate their security and to ruin their childhood. Now, Charles Vinson, he said, listen, I take responsibility for my actions and I accept the consequences of my poor decisions. He said, I failed them and I feel ashamed of myself to be called a father. Well, you're right. You're not a father. You're an abuser. And everyone's going to know you as an abuser. Your biological connection to these children has been obliterated because of your actions and the fact that you put Mary, your partner, above their needs, and you did it in the most despicable of ways. Now, Superior Court Judge Jeffrey Clark, they actually rejected the request for a minimum sentence and said, listen, the extreme cruelty of the crimes, amongst other things, demonstrate that there is no way they're getting the minimum sentence. So he said the video footage from the surveillance cameras in the home did not tell the entire story of the boys' suffering. So he's basically saying, listen, as the defense, you can say that these are the events that actually occurred, but I know that many other things went on behind closed doors, and that means that no minimum sentence is occurring here. He also said it will be impossible for them to forget the evil done to them. They will carry this with them for the rest of their lives. Now, when it came down to sentencing, I do have a smile on my face, and you'll know why. Mary Vinson was sentenced to, drumroll, 106 years in prison. That's my kind of judge. And the judge called the abuse the most evil, extensive, and persistent evil he has ever seen. Charles Vinson was sentenced to 49 years, so he's not going to get out of prison alive. And the judge did note that whilst Charles was not the primary offender, he absolutely 100% enabled, facilitated, and sometimes even participated in the abuse against these innocent children. Now that means, doesn't it, that for the most part, we can all breathe easy knowing that the couple are going to spend the rest of their lives in jail. And amen to that. Amen to that. And also, just going to throw it out there, neither of them are going to probably have a very good time, because we really hate child abusers. We really hate child torturers, and for good reason. They are the scum. They're the lowest of the low. They're there with sex offenders. They're there with child killers because they have that potential to be equally as malevolent. Those boys lived for the grace of God. It's as simple as that. But it could have been a very, very different story. When you're in intensive care for 3 days because you're so malnourished and so dehydrated, you've had a lucky escape from literally having your life ended. And she and he were willing to put the children in that situation. So they deserve all of the negativity that they will encounter when they are in jail. Now, in a statement, Attorney General Kathy Jennings said, these children went through hell. Now they never have to worry about their abusers again. Even when these cases are strong, they are not easy. The facts are chilling. Knowing what these children experienced weighs on all of us. But knowing that they are safe now is why we do this work. I'm grateful to prosecutors and law enforcement who rescued them from this torture. These are the cases that keep us up at night. The evidence in this case is disturbing, and my prayers are with the victims who, thank God, are somewhere safe. These children will deal with medical issues far into the future and undoubtedly suffer emotionally and mentally. But they have a shot now, a really good shot. they're safe and being well cared for, which I think is what all of us would hope for. I think we all need to take a deep breath of relief that they were rescued. Mark Hudson, who represents the Office of the Child Advocate, said that the boys are in foster care and are doing markedly better. But what he also said was they were still dealing with really challenging issues. And he actually said they have attempted to place the boys with permanent families, which have not worked, after potential adopting parents have declined to move forward after learning about the boys' past. Isn't that sad? It's just so sad that these two boys, these babies, because, you know, this was happening to them at 10 and 11 years of age. And people who are looking to adopt children or foster children, they know that the more trauma that they've had in the past, the more trouble they may be. And that's got nothing to do with the fault of the child and everything to do with the fault of those who've abused the children. But when you're making decisions about your life, you're trying to think about what will enhance it, not what may debilitate it. And when you have children who've been so fundamentally tortured and broken and abused, and when you create all these health issues for them as well, when it comes down to fostering choices, often those children will be overlooked because the parents just feel like they understandably don't have the capacity to meet the children's needs. And that means that the children are left in a system that we all know is broken. Now, in this case, do I believe the boys are in a better situation? Absolutely. They're getting fed. They'll be able to drink regularly. They'll get educated. They'll be warm and they'll be safe. But it probably means that the life that they should have had and could have had they been taken in by loving foster parents or been adopted by loving people, that trajectory would have been a far better one. But like I said, often these children are overlooked because of the very thing that should mean they should be embraced. And that is what was done to them, not what they did to their own lives. I hope to God that some charitable, amazing human being knows that they can find it within their heart to offer these children a home, to bring them into the bosom of their own family, to create a new life for them. Because even though they may not become the individuals that they should have and could have if they've been brought up in a loving environment, because the fractures are there, with the right care, the right compassion, the right belief, their lives could be good enough. And sometimes accepting that good enough is amazing is something that we all have to acknowledge. I hope that they get their good enough. I hope that they get their amazing. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. You won't have heard of this case, I doubt. If you know any more about it and you have heard about it, please do let me know. There was very limited stuff online, but it blew my mind that these children were almost starved to death and dehydrated to death in the care of their parents, and that one parent, the biological in this case, was willing to be privy and party to the abuse because he didn't want to argue with his wife. It just exemplified how throwaway and meaningless children can be to the very people who should have them in the highest regard in their worlds, and how betrayed so many children are out there. Like I said, it is interesting to think that if you're in a step family, your children are 10 times more likely to be abused than if you weren't. It's one of those things that I think you really need to consider when you're a single parent, because you need to consider those realities, and you always need to hold your children in priority form whenever you get in new relationships. I'm not trying to teach grandma to suck eggs, you all know this stuff, but it just really stays with me because, like I said, I'm in a step-parent relationship, so I know how important it is to have a partner who validates, loves, and raises your children up and doesn't do the opposite. Let me know your thoughts as ever in the comments, and I will see you again next time. I'm sorry this is a shorter case, but it's one that I thought was really, really important, so I wanted to cover it. I wanted to give a voice to the voiceless in this case, which are those beautiful boys. I hope life presents them with a glorious journey, and the journey that they absolutely deserve in light of what they've experienced and endured. Be safe, guys. See you again soon.